Hey guys, what's up? Today I'm gonna show you the 10 most extremely obscure JRPGs published by Sega that I could find. Not only released on Sega consoles, but in all consoles of all type of all companies worldwide. That's right, all of these games were released in North America. So as usual, no only in Japan games. Alright, let's begin! Number 10. 7th Dragon 3, Code VFD. This is part of a series that started back on the Nintendo DS. However, Code VFD is the only one we've gotten so far. It's not surprising considering how obscure this series is. And yes, I am aware this isn't that obscure since it's not that old, and it's a 3DS game, which is why I put it at number 10. So it's a quest-driven RPG where you'll control several parties of customizable characters. But even though it's based on quests, most of them in search for dragons, this one is also heavy on the story. There's tons of dialogue and a variety of NPCs that revolve around an organization that hunts down these dragons. Do you need to play the others to understand this one? I'm not sure since I've only played this one and it felt kinda standalone. Pretty sure someone in the comments will let you know though. I really dig the battle system here, even though in the long term it can be somewhat repetitive. It's just this game has tons of personality and it plays very well as a matter of fact. Anyway, great game published and developed by Sega themselves. Number 9. Bleach, the Third Phantom. What, you didn't know there was a grid-based strategy RPG based on Bleach for the Nintendo DS? Well, now you do. Why is this game so freaking obscure is because Sega didn't really care much about it. They just published it while focusing more on the fighting games also on the DS. It's obviously based on the anime and manga, with a story written by the creator of the series himself. You play as either of these two twin brothers that are training to become Soul Reapers. Don't know much about Bleach, so I couldn't understand some things, like several characters from series making appearances. The battle system is awesome here. It's what most strategy RPG lovers want since it's good, balanced, and not too convoluted. It plays like most, with a player phase where you control all your characters and then an enemy phase for the enemies. Upon making contact, these 2D badass animations will play out even for the simplest of attacks. I didn't get very far in this game, but I noticed it also has its own triangle system of strengths and weaknesses. Then there are these free time segments where you can watch events with other characters. So there's a lot of reading involved here. Overall, it's a pretty solid RPG, and that's coming from a guy who's not a fan of Bleach at all. Number 8. Infinite Space. Another RPG on the DS that's kind of obscure is Infinite Space. I've covered this game a few times in this channel. I've said before that the story and characters seem cool, but the gameplay itself is so hard to get into. Yuri is a rookie captain of the ship, and he's traveling the universe to investigate the epitaphs, dark artifacts connected to the existence of black holes. One of the most interesting aspects of this story is how it's told through two arcs. Upon reaching a certain point of the game, the plot will jump 10 years into the future, where Yuri, once again, will try to get to the bottom of things and stop the invasive empire. Combat is slow, complex, and very convoluted. Your ship faces off enemy ships. Battles occur in real time and you gotta wait for this hard to explain command gauge to execute your actions. Understanding it and controlling it is a pain in the ass because it also regulates moving and dodging. There's also a lot of spaceship simulation. It actually involves the management of up to 150 crew members and several design models. However, the entire game is controlled by the stylus, which only makes everything even more tedious. Listen, it's not a bad game, don't take me wrong, it's just I really couldn't get into it. Number 7. Dark Savior. Remember Landstalker on the Genesis? Well, this is allegedly the spiritual successor, but it's exclusive to the Sega Saturn, and it's kinda bad. I talked about it in my top 15 JRPGs with multiple battle systems video. I don't remember criticizing the controls, camera, and movement that much because I was trying to focus the script on the combat. Well, all of that is poorly designed here, and it makes it harder to enjoy the damn game. The regular action against random enemies is just meh. Landstalker was much better, and that's saying a lot. Well, I guess these fighting game parts, these duels, are kind of alright. You don't need to move around and suffer from a bad camera anymore or sluggish controls, because you can only move back and forth. Collision detection is mediocre, but it works, and I guess it's sort of fun to be able to capture some of your enemies and play as them on future boss fights. I don't want to bore you with the story, so let's just wrap this up by saying this is a game with great ideas, but most of them, sadly, poorly executed. Number 6. Mystaria, The Realms of Lore. Another really obscure game on the Saturn is this one. It's also the only RPG on the system I've never played. So why did I decide to include it in the video? Well, because it's what I think of as the most obscure RPG on the system. It also has a very interesting release, check this out. Apparently it was released twice in North America. One under the title name Mystaria, and the second time now called Blazing Heroes. In Japan though, its name is actually Rig Lord Saga. A sequel was released, but it stayed over there. Like many RPGs released on this system, it didn't get a lot of reviews because overall, the Saturn just wasn't successful in North America, which means most of its games are obscure as hell. I can't really talk about this game, but from what I've seen in some videos, it looks really lame. Those giant pre-rendered sprites are kind of uninteresting, and the controls seem sluggish. I still hope I can play this game one day just to have a proper opinion about it. Number 5. Dark Wizard. Dark Wizard is an exclusive on the Sega CD, influenced by classic Genesis strategy game Master of Monsters. Players control one of 4 main playable characters. Yup, each story is completely different as is the goal of the game. But all of them play around these crucial campaigns on these long-ass maps based on hexes instead of grids. The objective is to kill the boss and capture their base, although you'll first have to deal with a lot of enemies on your way. You can hire a huge variety of monsters or mercenaries, each with their own attributes, of course. These missions will take a huge amount of time. You'll be playing them sometimes for over an hour. There's also a lot of microsite content where you can send characters into towns, but it isn't that interesting. The battlefield is where the true core of the gameplay is. Just remember to always protect your main character. This is an awesome game and one of the best RPGs in this list, but beware, it isn't exactly friendly for newcomers into strategy RPGs. Number 4. Miracle Warriors, Seal of the Dark Lord. We're talking about the Master System here when JRPGs were barely starting, which is why this one has more of a computer Western RPG feel more than anything. In fact, it was originally released for the PC-88 and was ported to several other computer systems, including the Famicom. We only got its Master System port though. The game's extremely outdated and honestly not fun to play nowadays. I understand its appeal back in the late 80s with all those computer RPGs, but today it's just boring, repetitive and unappealing. For starters, you follow a request from the king to seal the Dark Lord with the help of a fairy and save the world. That's it. I understand it's the late 80s, but come on, much better plots were already out by then, like Phantasy Star. It's a turn-based RPG mostly played in first person. Navigation goes on while moving on grids on the several locations you'll visit. Like most RPGs of its time, it's one of those where the hell do I go type of game. Battle system is in turns, but it's nothing special except for the annoying fact that it's freaking brutal at first, so you'll die a hell of a lot here. Anyway, it's mediocre, but at least it has a very cool soundtrack. Number 3. Time Stalkers. It's a crossover from the Climax Entertainment games like Landstalker, for example. Actually, you can play as any character available once they appear in the game. Sword, the protagonist, doesn't really have to be your main character, even though the story centers around him being lost in an interconnected world. It's a roguelike RPG and it looks just fine despite the graphics being kinda mediocre. Randomly generated dungeons are bland and boring, but they're also alright, I guess. What stands out is the battle systems. It isn't like in most roguelike games. This is turn-based with your regular menus. You'll fight once you touch one enemy, either alone or with party members. These party members will always be the monsters you can recruit into your party. Once you finish a dungeon, you'll be back at level 1, like in most roguelike RPGs. Navigation in dungeons and towns is a problem since the controls aren't that good, to be honest, but it's okay. Overall, it's precisely that, an okay game. You'll probably enjoy it even more if you like roguelike RPGs, turn-based RPGs, and of course, some of the Climax Entertainment games, including the ones we never got. Number 2. Defenders of Oasis. Most people don't know there's actually a few RPGs released on the Game Gear. Shining Force Gaiden 2 is one of them, known as the Sword of Hadja. Defenders of Oasis is another one, of course. It's based on the 1001 Nights stories from the Middle East. The plot, however, is kinda generic about an Arabic prince in a quest to stop the Empire from reviving some ancient dark god. The gameplay is also pretty basic, but you gotta understand it's an RPG from the early 90s, so we can't be too harsh on it. For its time, it was a pretty decent game that was quite successful in Japan. Over here though, the Game Gear itself met the same fate than the Saturn before it, and therefore, most of its catalog is highly obscure. But this turn-based RPG is good in my opinion. Short, concise, and balanced. It didn't win any awards, but it has good graphics, good music, good battle system, and an okay cast of characters. Give it a chance if you can. Number 1. Crystal Warriors. I decided to put Crystal Warriors in the first place because of its tragic irony. Most people don't know it's actually the first grid-based tactical RPG ever localized to North America. It came around a year after Fire Emblem on the Famicom had been released. But of course we got it until the next one, a year before Shining Force reached our lands. Is it historically important? Yes and no. Yes, because it's one of the earliest strategy RPGs ever created, but no, because it didn't really influence anything. It was developed by Sega as an attempt to compete precisely with Fire Emblem, but it didn't sell very well worldwide. It follows the quest of Princess Iris in an attempt to protect one of the 4 elemental crystals and take back the others. These are needed by the enemy in order to fully disrupt the peace in the world. Through the journey, you'll visit a town where other characters can be recruited. Depending on how much money you have and decisions, you'll get a different one. Battles rely heavily on elemental weaknesses, so you'll always need to figure out who to have fight against who. You can also capture monsters, but they can only be used as summons during each character's turn. For its time, this was a solid game, and it's not as outdated as it might seem. I loved it nonetheless and appreciate it for being what it truly set out to be, a simple, turn-based tactical RPG. Alright guys, that's it. Those were my 10 picks for today's video. Don't forget that my latest book has been fully translated to English. Link in the description below to Amazon. This is a dark story, psychological horror story, very bizarre, hard to understand, convoluted and shit, you know. If you're into that kind of stuff, you'll love this book. Link in the description below, don't forget. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. And the link too. See you next time.